Awesome. So this is our review for React, and we're going to build the Rick and Morty application together, pairing. I put together like a rough pseudocode list kind of based off of yesterday, and like we saw, like helps to break your project into several steps. We're going to start a nice clean React app. We're going to implement our core routing functionality, and then we're going to build our pages and their features one at a time and just go through each page. I made a little note there. If we have time, we'll talk about the React Router Splat. And then once we have that done, we want to make sure to spend a good amount of time talking about Cypress. And so we'll be going through Cypress tests that roughly correspond to what you'll see on the assessments. Does that sound good to folks? And do folks have any questions before we kick it off? Cool. All right. Francisco at the top and create a directory for our project and a new Vite project. And then we can start clearing up all the default Vite stuff so we can put our nice Rick and Morty code in. And we're just going to make the default Vite project, go on in, install our dependencies, and start clearing up things that we don't need. Like we don't need stuff in app CSS or index CSS, and we definitely don't need all that stuff in app JSX. So it's all going to go. And while Francisco's doing that, can someone remind me, what are the dependencies we know that we're going to need to install? What are the NPM packages that we know we're going to need to install in a minute?
Axios.
Yep, Axios. What else?
Bootstrap again, depending on.
Yep, Bootstrap. Yeah, Bootstrap. And then React Router DOM. And then when we get there, Cypress. And all right, I love it. And so we're installing the default dependencies in the package.json with this default React project that we built that includes React and a couple other things. And then when this is done, let's just go ahead and install everything that we need. We'll need Axios so we can make our HTTP requests. Yeah, are you thinking to get rid of that strict mode in main JSX, Francisco?
Interesting.
We can get rid of strict modes so we don't have to clutter up the console log with double renders. We just installed Axios. Love it. React Router DOM, definitely a necessity. And we're going to create these directories just to help organize our code. Remember that, the React components that go in pages are just normal React components, same as that go in components. We're just using them for different purposes. The same way that, in Python, a bicycle class and a banana class are both classes, but do different things. And there's a good question in Whiskey Chat. I think let's go ahead and finish setting up our bootstrap and stuff, and then we will check in on the whiskey questions channel. So now our package JSON has been updated. We can see all of the dependencies that we've installed. Later on, when we get to Cypress, we'll add it there. And we've got Axios, Bootstrap for the CSS, React Bootstrap for nice Bootstrap React components, and React Router DOM. And there was a question in Whiskey Questions. Tailwind is usually installed as a dev dependency with the -d flag. If so, does this mean that Tailwind isn't usually used in production? And actually, that one caught me by surprise when we were using Tailwind the other day as well. I wouldn't have expected it to be installed as a dev dependency, but that does seem to work okay. Francisco, I don't know if you have any more context on that one.
Oh, no, I have no idea, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's okay. Especially if it's on the Tailwind docs. And in fact, I'm looking at the Tailwind docs right now in the V install steps, and it does indeed say to install it as a dev dependency. So that seems to be how Tailwind wants us to use it, and that seems to work okay. Good question. So we've done some setup. We know for Rick and Morty, we're going to want a character card component, and we're going to want a NavBar. So let's go ahead and build the character card and just grab the default example from the React Bootstrap code and modify it to do what we need. And I don't know, do you want to pass in props now or worry about that later?
I think I'm gonna worry about that later, just to get it working first and displaying, and then afterwards I'll worry about the the individual.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Let's go ahead. Yeah, let's just make a navbar. And I do think it makes sense. Like the basic example here gives us a lot of code that we can just use and bring in. And then we can very quickly get it rendering and tweak what we need to tweak to get it working.
All right.
How about maybe like a homepage?
Sure. Let me go ahead and open that up here.
And the nice thing about creating all of these page files right away is that then when we're setting up our routing, we can just go ahead and import them and our code won't break.
Oh, I apologize, everyone. I'm gonna mute myself for my.
Sorry that you're feeling worse, Francisco. I hope you get better over the weekend.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And kind of like we did yesterday, we can just make a nice skeleton for each page. Again, just so we have something that renders. Mike, and I see there's a request. Yeah, later on when we get to using like React context with React Router DOM's outlet and outlet context, we'll see if we can't pop it open in React DevTools to take a look. And again, like the nice thing about following a pattern is once you have a pattern you're comfortable with, you can just reuse it very quickly as your own skeleton code or guide code. And now that we've done this, we could maybe, what do you think, hook up some routing?
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Yeah, let's do it. So we got to create our router file where we're going to give React Router DOM the configuration of all of the different paths that we're going to be able to navigate to, all the different URLs that will show up in the URL bar in the app. And we're going to tell React Router DOM for each path what component it should render. Right. And to do this, we use the createBrowserRouter function from the React Router DOM package. And createBrowserRouter is a function that we pass this array into, and we give that array these route objects, and we have the one parent route object for our main app JSX component. And that's going to be sort of the parent, the base route for the whole application. Then all of our other pages are child routes off of that. And especially as we're building the React router, please do throw whatever questions you have into the Whiskey Questions channel so we can discuss them as we're building this out. Because that's very much the purpose of this review today. And again, because we've gone ahead and we've made nice little skeleton pages for each of our pages, we can just go ahead and import all of them right off the bat because we know we're going to need to use them as we build out all the routes.
Did I miss a page?
The
missed-
ACharacter page.
I did. Rough.
Nice. And also, folks, if there's anything specific you'd like to make sure we cover, I'm throwing a comment in Whiskey Questions. And please put it on that comment as, you know, as a thread. And when we get there, we can make sure to touch on it. And so now we've imported into our router all the different pages that we're going to use. And we've got our array and we've got our router object for our main app. And the path is that / that base route or path. And then all of our other routes will be children off of that main path. And we can add index through there. I'm not sure if we need it. I think we can just do children and make the home page the index, depending on preference.
No, that makes sense. I just couldn't remember the syntax. Thank you.
No worries. I suspect that might end up working as well. So again, we've got another array of these route objects and the home page, because I don't want it to have a separate path from I want that to be the first thing that renders, and I don't have to put /home or anything in there. I set index equal to true. And then element is the component React Router will render there. And so I think for the about page, our path can be, yep, slash about, and we want a slash in front of it. I'm actually not sure if we need the slash in front of it, but we do want the slash at the end. And I'm actually double checking about that slash. Yeah, we're good. We don't need a leading slash in the paths here. I don't think. But we want the trailing slash at the end. And each of these objects is React Router calls it a route object. And when we change the URL to that path, when we navigate to that path, React Router will render that element. And can someone remind me, how does React Router know where to render the character page component or the favorites character page component? Brian, yes, sir.
Is that wherever the outlet component is placed is how the router knows where to display it in that very outlet component.
Yeah, exactly. And what Francisco is building now, by the way, and I apologize because I know I didn't get to this, but if we pass the star as a path, that is like a default path. So any URL that we put in, any path that we put in that doesn't match any of those other paths will default to that one. And that's different from our error page because they're like, this way we can have a not found page, say for a character that doesn't exist, but we can also have an error page that we can like drive people to if there's an error, and we can control how that happens.
All right, I think the app is, or the router is good. But now I believe we have to plug it in through main JSX.
Yeah. And can someone remind me why we have to do this while we're doing this? David, yes, sir.
Yeah, so instead of just straight up rendering the app in your main JSX, which would just render whatever you have in app.jsx, it's setting up so that you can have outlet on that and just be able to link to all the different pages.
Yeah.
That was probably a bad explanation.
No, I think you're on the right path. React Router and that route provider component is now deciding what other components to render based on the path. So this route provider component gets mounted on the DOM. And then when we go to our base path, just that slash, it says, hey, I need to render app. And then when we navigate to a different child path, React Router decides what to render, and that's all happening inside the router provider. And then exactly like you were saying, inside app, we have the outlet. And so then inside there, the children of app can get rendered as we navigate to different routes. And as we build it out, we can maybe draw a couple diagrams and see it in action. And there was a great question in React questions. What URL would send us to the error page instead of the not found page? So I believe what happens is now that we've created a not found page, if I put a URL in the URL bar that doesn't exist, and maybe we can demo this right now by just throwing some nonsense in the URL and watching us go to the not found page. it should take us there.
Sorry, I'm trying to make sure that the router gets plugged in correctly first. It looks like I made it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I think we need to add outlet to app.jsx.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
No worries. And thank you again for helping pair today for the review session, especially because I know you're under the weather, man. I figured it'd be good. Yeah, this way you guys get to see both our coding styles, and also we make sure that we stay on like a good pace. And this raises a good point. As Mike was saying and Brian was saying, if we don't put the outlet in here, React Router DOM, it rendered app just fine, but the children of app, it didn't know where to put. And they go inside the outlet. And so to answer the question about the not found page, if we go to, something that doesn't exist, there's now a route for that. The star route is anything else that we haven't specified. And then I've pulled up the React Router docs because I had to look up what they say about error element. And what they say is when exceptions are thrown in component rendering or some more advanced React Router things that we have not seen called loaders or actions, the error path will be rendered. So now it's like an actual error will take you to the error path before. And I apologize for not showing this earlier. You know, we had the error path and React Router threw an error when we put it in a path because it didn't know where to go. But now we have like a default catch-all. Does that help answer your question? Albert?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Did everyone see that demonstration? So right now, if I take off this arrow function and I just try to call the function, that raises an error, so it shows my error page, right? Whereas if I have the function,
Thank you.
regular page renders, but my not found page is what gets triggered because of the improper URL. All right.
Yeah, nice. And do you happen to have React Dev Tools installed, Francisco?
I do, yes.
Can we take a quick look at it? And yeah, let's make this a bit bigger. I think you have to click on it's the double arrows. Yeah, the one above those double arrows, the other double arrows. Yeah, components. So this is a little nuts, right? Like that router provider component we created in main.jsx, but React Router creates all these other components and all these layers. But way down there where Francisco's highlighting, we can see our app component. And inside that, we see the outlet component. And then we see this component named context provider. And we learned a little bit about context, React context, where we didn't dig into it too much, but if you have a context provider component, that's how you pass context down to its children. But way down there, we see the not found page, and the not found page is a child of the outlet. And let's see what happens when we go to a different valid page, like maybe the about page, and let's see what happens to the children of the outlet. So now if we scroll down, and we see the children of the outlet, we see the about page. So React Router DOM inside the app component, when we put the outlet there, inside the outlet will render the children based on the path. And so hopefully does that help illustrate a bit more kind of how React Router DOM is behaving and the outlet works? Yes, no, maybe. I'm going to take that as a maybe, especially since I'm not seeing a lot of thumbs up. So we'll return to that one later. But again, please do be firing away with questions in React Router questions so we can cover this stuff as we go. Next, we want to start building out our navbar. And again, like we've copied over that default bootstrap code, and now we can start modifying it. We can change the name of the brand. We can do a little bit of fanciness if we want to, Francisco. We could do like the as link. And then I think we just need to change href to 2. And let's see if that, did that work or did I get that wrong? And we'll talk about that in just a sec, folks. Yeah. So what we did here is the navbar.brand component, it takes a href under the hood. It creates a link so that, when you click on the logo or the brand, it takes you back to wherever you want it to go, usually the homepage. What Bootstrap lets us do for these navbar brand and navbar link components is we can keep the Bootstrap styling, but we want to use that React Router DOM link component. So this as prop tells Bootstrap, hey, use this other component link. This is the one that has the behavior, but keep the nice styling that Bootstrap gives us. And so the way we do that is we add this prop named as, and we give it the link component from React Router DOM. And then just like if we were using the link component, since nav.link is now behaving as React Router DOM's link, we add the to prop with the path where we want to go. And I see a question too in the thread of Whiskey questions. Why the app seems to display when the browser URL is set to localhost and the port without the slash. Why we don't see that slash in the router that we have with our base path. And that's because the slash indicates, as DJ kind of said, that was a great answer. That's the default behavior of web server where if it's just the slash is optional. It indicates the base route. So like localhost colon 5173 is our base route, and that's what that slash represents. And so now we can build out some more links to all our different pages, and then we can test them out and see them in action with the Bootstrap navbar. And we see that all the links we wrote work, our navigation works, and we have the nice collapsing with the navbar hamburger function. And so now we have a lot of really nice Bootstrap navbar functionality. Um, what should we do next? So the homepage doesn't need a lot on it, right? The about page doesn't need that much. I think it's really like the all characters page where it gets interesting.
All right.
Yeah, what are you thinking? All characters?
Sure, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So what do we got to do here for the all characters page? Just to recap, can someone maybe remind me of the steps if we were to pseudocode this out real quick? Or simply any step along the way?
You would need to create your state variable, and then in the use effect, you would create a function that would fetch from the API, and then you would set the state to the results from your API fetch with Axios.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to need to use Axios to make an HTTP GET request to the API that we're looking at the docs for right now. And I think we might just want to get, what do you think again? All characters?
I think so.
Yeah. And we know that we're going to need to use async await. And because we're using React, we know that we need to make our HTTP request inside a use effect. And once we get that data, we know we're going to need to put that in some component state. And then we're going to render that onto the page using a character card component. So we're going to need the use state and the use effect hook. We're going to need Axios. And when we get there, we're going to need our character card, though we could always just get the HTTP request working with the console log and come back to that. And we're going to need some React component state that's going to be, I think, probably an empty array to hold all of our characters. And we'll initialize it. And by default, it'll be null, or we can put the empty array in there so that we know what it is. Are you thinking to do some pagination, I take it?
It looks like it gives you a next page and a previous page in the URL, and I'm assuming that's how you get the remaining of the characters, because it doesn't look like it returns it all in one page. It gives you 42 pages, and each one of them has a certain amount of characters.
Oh, I missed that. Yeah, you're totally right. Yeah, and actually, I think that's a pretty nice way to do it with the component state that way, because we can keep it simple, and every time we load a page, we can put it into all characters, and then we can maybe update next page and previous page and hook those up to some use effects. So, yep, we're gonna need to do an Axios.get, and that is our await, because we're awaiting the HTTP response. And I think once we get there, we'll have to add in um I see.
Hmm.
So basically, the next page state holds the URL that we hit to get the next page of our data. Previous page will hold the previous stage's state. And to initialize this, we just are grabbing the first ones. And I think this makes sense. And then right away, we can set this so that it's ready to go. And I think we can just go ahead and set it to the same thing, and it will just be null the first time around, and that's okay.
I'm trying to think of a way that I could do this reusable, but I think I'll diagnose it later once I get there.
Yeah, I think this is fine. I don't think we'll have that much duplicate code. We could rename all characters and set all characters, since it's not technically all of them, but that's not that big a deal, I think. And I think this makes a lot of sense because we have everything nicely kind of hooked up, and we can even maybe use some use effects to watch next page and previous page. And I see a couple questions in Whiskey Chat, and I think as soon as we get the code running, perfect. I think this is a good time to pause and do a little question catch up. So in Whiskey Questions, I see a question about the NavBar. David, about like using the NavBar in a different way with the link. I'm not honestly sure what that navlink tag link does. So I am not 100% on that. If it works, I think it is okay, but you may want to do it the other way. There's another good question about our initial use state value for all characters. If we need to set it to an array as opposed to be null.
If we utilize null, we would have to do some conditional rendering because mapping is a function that belongs to only an array. So if you utilize something like null, you're gonna get an error saying no property named map
Yeah.
for variable all characters.
Yeah, exactly. Our code we can call map on an empty array and it just won't do anything, but it will work just fine. It just maps over nothing. But if it's not an array and we call map on it, it throws an error for the reason that Francisco was saying. Does that help answer your question, Crystal?
So what would be the difference in doing it that way rather than doing it as null and then setting it up for characters and in your map statement in your return, if that makes sense?
If you set it to null, you need to add a ternary or a conditional to make sure you only call map when it is an array.
Right. So is there like a difference in doing it one way or the other, or like a preference, or?
I think the preference is to set it to an empty array because then you can always call map on it, because .map works just fine on an empty array. It just doesn't execute, but it doesn't throw an error. So that works. So I think that's preferred because you don't need the conditional logic. Also, it's a good principle to keep the shape of your data the same when you can. And since we know we're going to be putting an array in there, putting an empty array in there keeps it the same shape.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. And another question from Will, would it work the same if you put the URL in axios.get instead of useState? Great question. And let's take a look at that in just a moment. And what Francisco, I see we've got some conditional logic for the next button and the previous button. And when we hit a good pause point, let's take a quick look at the get all characters function.
Okay, we'll do.
I was gonna say we might be able to just have that use effect listen to next or pass next page and previous page in the dependency list of the use effect.
I was actually gonna make it track request URL.
Got it.
Because now if I click on next, yeah, there we go.
Nice.
Okay, awesome. Which part do you want to look at and break down?
Yeah, let's look at where did it go? There it is. Line 13 in get all characters and our React component state on line 8. So Will, you were asking, would it work the same if in that Axios get on line 13, we put in the URL? So if we hard code, what we want to do is we want to be able to pass in different URLs because the API like gives us one URL for page 1, a different one for page 2. So I want to be able to change that. So I don't want to hard code it inside the Axios.get. Does that answer your question, Will? Does that help a bit?
Yeah, so in like previous lectures, you would put in the URL and then bracket ID just to change the page number.
You could do that as well if you wanted to do it that way. I think you could do character and then question mark page equals ID or whatever, and that would probably default to 1. I think that does the same thing as that character URL we have on line 9. I don't think it makes a difference. I will
Gotcha.
say because the Rick and Morty API kind of gives us this as the way to get the first page of characters, it's not the worst to do it, but both will achieve the same effect. And so if we were doing it that way, instead of request URL and set request URL, it would just be like page and set page. And just like you were saying, the URL would be in there, but like the page number would be a variable inside a tag template literal. Since this API gives us the whole URL we need for the next page, this way is a little easier and cleaner. We don't have to construct it ourselves. We can just grab it from the API response.
Yeah, so you can see here, we have this console.log, and it's basically triggering every time something sets these states to a new value. So if I go and I clear my console and I refresh the page, we're gonna see that it sends the initial one, and then the initial state of both of these is null, all right? So it shows me null, but when I click on next, well, now it goes to the next page. The next page gives me the previous page. We know that I set it here on line 16, and I also set it on line 15, and we can see each character or each one being changed. This next function, what it does, or this buttons, what they do is they change the name of the request URL or the value of the request URL. That way, every time the request URL changes, I'm essentially triggering this function again to get all of my characters for that specific page through the request URL. So I'm just utilizing states to be able to reflect one another. Does that break it down pretty well? Oh, and I think that was Crystal's question. Crystal, did that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Of course.
Nice. Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're cooking. Yeah, that's a great pattern. I like that with the request URL and grabbing the pages. So now we've got our all characters page and we've got pagination working. So we're probably going to want to start making our character card and using the bootstrap card. And in fact, we've already got that set up. So we can go ahead and import it. We're going to need to start passing in props for the data that we care about to the character card.
And it looks like we care about, assuming all of this.
Yeah, I would agree. We could just, if we want to do it the quick way, we could just pass in all the, like, one data prop. Or we could maybe call it character info that we pass the whole object into. I don't know if you have a strong preference, or we could like make an individual prop for each thing.
I'm a fan of prop destructuring just so that I could use it kind of like an interface.
Same,
Let's do it this way.
same.
Okay. In that case, I will do it in that. But
Yeah, you don't need the space with the equals, I don't think.
I know, of course I have it. I apologize.
No, I know React and JavaScript. So we want name. Yeah. Yeah, and folks, this is once you start having lots of props, this is the way to write your components. We want status. That's just char.status. We want species, which is just char.species. I don't know what type is, but I guess we could pass it in. It's empty there for Rick. And then gender. And so origin is an object. We definitely need the image. So we should probably just do that one next, I think. And that's just going to be char.image. And what are you feeling, Francisco? How deep do we want to go? Do we want location and the episode list?
I think created will do the trick.
Let's do it. Yeah, those are good stretch goals. Those are the stretch goals, is like location and episode list. So this is nice because this just gives us a lot more control over our components, and when we pass in props, and it lets us really clearly see what the prop needs to render. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Yeah, and remember, props are passed in as one object, but we're going to destructure that object. And that's what we're doing right now. So we're grabbing each of these properties off of the props object, each of these key value pairs. Let's go ahead and do the image first. Yep, I love it. Great minds. All right. And the title should probably be their name. And the text, however, I think you want to display it for, status and species. We could do a bunch of unordered lists. Yeah, I think that'll work inside card.text. Let's see. Nice. Yeah, I'm always surprised Rick is alive, though in some ways that's like the whole premise of the show.
That's it, right? I'm not missing anything.
Type, but I don't know what that is, and then created, but I don't know if we really care about. Oh, you've got created. Nice. So we're using the ternary there so that if type is not empty, is not null or falsy, then we return that list element and render it. Otherwise, we return null.
Okay.
So I forgot how many characters we have here in Rick and Morty.
Okay.
All right. And do folks have any questions now that we've gotten our all characters page up and running and we're using a character card, and we've even got pagination going on? I see there's a question about drilling down to origin location. And I apologize. I'm not quite sure I understand. Could you maybe clarify a bit more on that, Nika? Is that about the URL? And we can come back to that. If we hit a point when it comes up, please let me know so that we can make sure to cover it. We've got characters. If we want to, we could put the page buttons above the map. Otherwise, we can scroll down and then we see our next and previous pages. Not that big a deal either way. And when I click the next button, we change that request URL state, and our use effect is watching the request URL state because it's in its dependency list, and the use effect fires again and uses that updated URL to get the next page of the previous page. Yeah, this is awesome.
Okay.
I think our next step here is probably doing either favorites or the individual character page.
Okay, let's do the individual one if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's see.
And while we're getting this one set up, someone remind me what React Router DOM hook are we going to need to use to create our individual character page?
useParams.
Yeah, awesome. I see it in the chat as well. Right? We want to put in the URL, the path is going to be character/1 or character/2 for, maybe Morty's ID is 1 and Rick's ID is 2. And so we need to use the React Router DOM useParams hook to change the path to update the URL. And then inside the individual character page, we need the useParams hook so that we can grab that URL and get that ID so we know what character we should render. So I think we should set up some skeleton here. We might need to add a route to our router if we haven't for the individual character page.
I believe we have a route already. Let me just.
Oh, okay. Then actually, let's just do a real quick review. So here we have the path, character/:ID. Remember, the colon says that what comes after that is a variable. So :ID is the variable placeholder for the particular character's ID. And that ID, that's the param on that route. And then we're going to use the useParams hook inside the ACharacter page to grab that param. And then I think we're going to need a use effect and a get character async function. Yeah, and some component state. And remember, folks, React executes the hooks in the order that we call them in. So by putting the use params first on line 6, we're guaranteed that the first thing the ACharacter page component does is get that ID from the path every time so that it's always there. So it'll be there and ready when we fire our use effect hook to make the HTTP request. So we didn't take a look at this during the week, but React Bootstrap gives us this very nice spinner component with a nifty little animation. And we're going to use this as our loading indicator. So while we're making the HTTP request, we'll display the spinner. And then when we get the data, we'll make the spinner go away. And we'll do that with a little bit of React component state that'll have a Boolean probably, and then a little bit of conditional logic, probably with a ternary. So what we're doing here is we have a ternary statement that says if the character is truthy, meaning null, remember, is falsy, so that's going to be false. If the character is truthy, we're going to show information about the character. If the character is falsy, we're going to show the loading spinner. And the character starts out null, so we show the loading spinner. And then once our HTTP request finishes, we'll update that bit of component state. We'll update the character, and it'll become truthy, and then we'll see the character information. And what are you thinking, just to kind of grab that UL right there on line 19?
Yeah, I forgot to pass in the ID.
Oh yeah, that would be good. I forgot about that as well. Good call. And can someone remind me why we need to pass the ID into the character card? What are we going to do with that ID?
Is it so you can use that to utilize use params?
Yeah, exactly. We need the ID because that's what's going to go in the URL in the path, right? Character / ID. So we need to have the character ID. And then when we click on this button, we're going to use, you could use a link, or you can use a button with the navigate hook. They both do the same thing. They will tell React Router to change its path. And remember, you do need to start with a / for links in the navigate hook. And I think it's character and then ID.
Thank you.
For sure. And we can change go somewhere to view details or whatever we want to call it. Yeah, love it.
Right. Oh, and I think that should do the trick. Oh no, because I don't have anything to get my data for the one character, do I?
Yeah, we can see the routing work though. I think we'll just see the loading spinner.
Oh, okay. Let me display the ID in that case.
But that's a good idea. Right. So I click on the button. React router changes its path to character / whatever ID that character is. The individual character page renders, but because we haven't gotten any data, character is null, so we render the loading spinner. And Nika, I think that's correct in the chat. We know which character we're choosing and we grab the right one. And that's because we're passing the ID into the character card component. And then we're using that ID when inside character card, we call navigate and we give it the ID. Does that answer your question? And there's a great question in Whiskey channel on Whiskey Questions as well. Will the ID always be the same as your key? And the answer is no, it will not. The key is whatever we set it to be. If we set the key to be the ID, then yes. But sometimes if you like use an array index for a key, that's okay too. They don't have to be the same. Oh, and Nika, I apologize. I didn't realize that was an answer. Yes, you got it. You hit the nail on the head, and thank you. And Crystal, did that answer your question about the key and ID?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, great question. Yeah, the key is just there so React can keep track of the different lists of stuff. And it's just easy and convenient to set it to the ID because the key just has to be unique. That's the important thing. And we know the ID is unique. So it's just easy, quick, and simple to do it that way. All right. And so, right, we've written our async HTTP request using axios.get to hit the endpoint, the API endpoint to get an individual character. We update our React component state with that data on line 12 as set character. And then the component re-renders, and now that there's character data, we don't show the spinner, we show the component. And because the use effect is watching ID, which is in its dependency list, once we get that ID, the use effect will fire and make our HTTP request. And as we're finishing this off, what questions do folks have about the individual character page and the useParams hook? So I have a question for folks as we're doing this. Is the ACharacter page a child of the outlet component? Not a trick question, I promise. You have a 50% chance of being correct.
Yes.
Yes, it is. And can you explain why?
It's under our router.
Yeah, exactly. In our router, this is a child route of app. And we put the outlet component inside app, and that's where all the child routes of app get rendered inside the outlet. And so all of our paths, all of our routes that are children of app get rendered as children inside the outlet. And if you remember, we saw that earlier in React DevTools when we saw that tree and we had the outlet and we navigate to a different page and we'd see it inside. What about the character card? When we render the character card, is that getting rendered inside the outlet component? Is that a child of the outlet component too? Like when we go to the all characters page and we've got like 20 character cards, are those children of the outlet? Again, your odds are good, folks. It's 50-50. And in fact, Francisco, can we quickly open up DevTools and take a peek at React's DevTools and see where these character components get rendered in our component tree?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, could you give me a split second? I got something.
Yeah, of course, man. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt your flow. Nice. Okay. Right. So the character name is also getting conditionally rendered. Yeah, so there's all these components that React Router creates, but if we scroll all the way down, we see the outlet. There it is. And so we see the ACharacter page. And if you don't mind, let's navigate to the all characters page. And if we scroll all the way down in DevTools and we find the outlet, there we go. So below outlet, you see the all characters page. And so all characters is a child of outlet, and all the character cards we rendered are getting rendered inside all characters. So they're children of the outlet too. I keep thinking of the movie Children of the Corn every time I say this. I apologize, folks. But so all of these are inside the outlet component and are children of the outlet. And when we get to the outlet context in a bit, that's why anything that's a child of the outlet can access the outlet's context. But something like the NavBar, which is not a child of the outlet, because it gets rendered right next to it in app.jsx, cannot. So we're making good time here. And I think, is favorite characters up next?
Yeah, I think that's the next thing.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground, right? We've built our app. We've done all characters. We've added pagination. We have the character card. We just finished the individual character page using both the useParams hook and the useNavigate hook. Do folks have any questions before we move on to our next feature and start building out favorite characters? And please do ask, because that is very much the purpose of today. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and start building the favorite characters.
All right.
Yeah. And while we're doing this, can someone remind me, we're going to need to use React outlet context. And I know that involves something with like an object that gets shared. Can someone refresh my memory a little bit about that? What's the prop that I have to add here? Yeah, so we have to add a prop named context, and we pass an object inside that prop. And all of the children of the outlet can access this. But they don't get it through a prop. We have to use this hook called useOutletContext. So can the NavBar use the useOutletContext hook to get this object? Yes or no?
Let's say no.
Correct. And I see a couple other hands up as well. And can you explain why not?
Because it's being fed to the outlet, which contains all the other rendered pages. So you'd need to maybe wrap all of it in a different type of provider, like something to pass to the NavBar and the outlets if you wanted to.
Yeah, so you're right, like we could create React context if we wanted to do that. That's a bit more next level. The sort of first level straightforward response is only children of the outlet can access outlet context, and the navbar is a sibling, not a child, right? It's right next to it. So we'd have to stick the navbar inside one of our other components that gets rendered as a child if we wanted it to have outlet context. Or like you were saying, if we were getting more complicated, we could create some other React context, but that's kind of out of the scope of what we're looking at right now. I see a couple good questions. Jasmine, I'm not sure where you were asking if we need to add the key prop. Maybe was it somewhere on the favorites page?
Let's see, actually in the character cards down there.
Ah,
It's key equals to character ID. So I'm just curious about that since we already have the ID, then we just need to add an extra key so we can call.
yeah. Good question. We don't have to add the key prop here. We add it if we'll see it in a moment when we go back to the favorites page, and I'll point it out then. And Louis, to answer your question about on the characters page, is there a difference between the ternary question mark and double ampersand? Yes, there is. I think double ampersand means and, if I have that right. Yeah, double ampersand is and. So the thing to the left and the right of the double ampersand both need to be true. The ternary is like shorthand for an if statement. So there are two different things. So check out line 26 here. We're using the use outlet context hook. And because the character card gets rendered inside the outlet, it's a child of the outlet in the component tree. It has access to the outlet context to that object. So use outlet context, we call that function, that hook function, it returns the context object and we destructure it to get what we want.
I apologize, everyone. I know that there's likely a prettier way of doing this, but we are running out of time. And refactoring may take a little longer than expected.
No, I think this is good. Yeah, this is, I ran into the same thing the other day. This is the trade-off I think it's the right trade-off, but of passing in each prop individually. Each thing individually. So that one might get a little trickier. We might want to write that one in app.jsx and pass it in through the context if this is remove.
I think that one's simpler, isn't it? I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, no, you're right, because we just need to filter. Yeah, you're right. My apologies.
What's wrong with you? Why are you complaining? Let's see. Button has no corresponding tag.
I think that slash might just have to go in front of the button in the closing tag instead of after button. In the closing tag.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think you're right. We can just filter and return false if the IDs match. We could probably, if we want to do it really succinctly, yeah, exactly. Or actually, we could just do char ID, yeah. And then I think we need to put an exclamation. I always get confused. Do we need an exclamation point to flip this Boolean, or am I confused?
No, I think that will do it. I don't know. Let me try it out. Let's see what it does.
Good call. That's by far the best way to do it. I think you're right. I think I'm just getting confused here. And then we can talk through that. And I think once we get the favorites page working, we can maybe take a break and then we can look at Cypress tests. Though we should check our to-do list to make sure there's not anything we're missing, but I think we got most of it.
Okay, so that it seems to work. But I likely want to establish whether this individual has already been chosen or not. So let's see.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't even think you need to make it state unless you want to. So what we're doing here is we're filtering through the favorites to find a match if our character is inside there. And filter will return an array with just that inside it. And that Boolean, we'll call it a function. It's a class constructor, but that's kind of different in JavaScript. Just turns that into a proper true or false. So instead of saying like favorites dot length to see if I have my favorite in there, we can use this Boolean call.
Ooh, I forgot the open and closing parentheses around this as well. Okay.
Do we need the set favorite or I see. Uh, I'm not sure if we need to ever actually use set favorite. I think the component might re-render, but I'm not 100% actually.
Well, we don't have a use effect to trigger this function again, so we have to do it manually, but I might be wrong. We'll see.
No, you might be right. I'm honestly not sure if the component re-renders when the context changes. Let's actually find that out.
We got those two backwards. Well, my favorites array is empty. So if my favorites array is empty, this should return an empty array, right?
It should, yes. Are we throwing an error?
No, let me.
You could also just stick a dot length on the end of that. It certainly won't hurt anything.
Yeah, but
It
it's
might,
it
I'm
wouldn't
not
be
100%. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, it wouldn't be checking every individual character if I did it that way.
Oh, after the dot filter. I think the Boolean handles an empty array and like maybe turns it to false. But if you do dot length, you know, if there's nothing in the array that's 0, and the Boolean will definitely convert that to false. And if our favorite is in the array, the dot length will be 1, and the Boolean will turn that to true.
Oh, it's determining it as true, even if it is an empty array.
Yeah, stick a dot length right towards the end of line 29 before the very last closing parentheses. Yeah, and so we filter to get the array, and then we get the length of the array, and now that's 0, and Boolean should turn that to false.
There you go.
Nice. Yeah, I like using that Boolean. That's a good call. It makes it more explicit what the intent of our code is.
Okay, so there's two.
Oh,
We have Rick, we have Morty. And if I remove, then we only have Rick. Okay, so that's working. Is there a limit on how many we can like? I think there's only 4, right?
I would have to check, but that sounds right. I love it. I think we should throw it in.
Say again.
I think we should throw it in. I don't know if we have time to add logic for, oh, there's confirmation in the chat. It's only 4. If there's time, we could add logic to not throw in a dupe and have like the same person twice. Though actually, we don't need to anymore because we've already updated the UI, so that's not possible.
Let's see. Favorite characters dot length less than 5. And will that work? Let's see. So it looks like we already have 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's still
You could grab all of the logic to set favorite characters and wrap it in a little arrow function, and then put whatever we want for it.
oh, like all of this.
Yeah, just keeping it line 74. Yes, if you wanted, you could grab all that stuff. Oh, I was thinking just to move it outside to make it easier to work with, but
Okay.
yeah, we could wrap it all in an arrow function and just then wrap it in like an if. That might be the easiest way to do it. Whether we do it outside or in there. Yeah, both patterns work. And then we could just do like if favorites.length is less than 5, and then we do all that stuff. And we looked it up. The React component will render when the context changes, so we don't have to update that component state, but it certainly doesn't hurt. And it also makes clear intent, so I think it's fine to keep it. Yeah, I don't think you need the arrow function wrapping it if you don't want it, but it's not hurting anything to have it there. Oh, maybe, do we need to pass in the ID? Oh, no, we don't, because this is the character card. I apologize.
Okay, so we have an array of 4. Oh, it still worked.
Bummer.
Oh, it's because I put less than 5. I want it to be less than 4. One, 2, 3, 4. Haha. All right. Got it work.
Nice.
If I remove 1 and add 1, there it is.
Nice. We're cooking.
Okay. Well, that was a little harder than I thought it would be, but we got it working. Okay.
Nice.
Hmm.
Yeah. What questions do folks have about the favorites page? Let's do a quick review and then we can wrap and maybe take a break.
Oh, we're not at the favorites page yet, but just on adding characters to favorites. Yeah.
Oh, I totally forgot about that. I got so ensconced into adding. Well, that's half the battle. Yeah, let's go ahead and build this favorites page and knock it on out.
Okay. That should be pretty relatively.
Yeah.
soon.
So we're going to want to use the use outlet context hook. And we can do that since the favorites page gets rendered inside the outlet as a child. It's a child route off of app. And when we call the use outlet context hook, it'll return the context object. And we're going to grab the favorite characters. You know, you might want to grab the set favorite characters setter function as well if you use the character cards, because it'll have those buttons.
But I didn't pass it down as a prop. They're grabbing it straight from use outlet context.
Oh, I see. Yeah, we can see when we get there.
Yeah.
And I think we can just map it onto, if we want to, the character cards.
And honestly, I might just do a bit of copying and pasting here.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's wise.
Oh, we're missing. There we go.
Oh, and you're totally right. We don't need to worry about the other stuff.
Favorite
And
character.
now we've got the favorite characters page working.
Okay, so now let's see. So I have no one in my favorite characters. If I add, let's go to the next page, add, and I can't get the big head because that would be too many characters. And now if I go over, I go to favorite characters. Oh, so cool.
Oh, let's see what happened.
Character card is not defined.
Oh, I think we just need to import it.
Yeah.
Best kind of problem to have.
Okay, but that reset my entire state, so now I need to redo it. Okay, so now let's go to characters again. 1, 2. Go to my next page. Oh, my mouse is freaking out. 1, and this I'm gonna grab the big head. 2, and if I try to do one more, it's not gonna let me. And now I go to favorite character.
Nice.
My favorite characters, which I can still use to remove favorites. There you go.
Nice.
All done. Okay.
Now we are 100% Rick and Morty. Yeah. And does someone want to maybe take a quick crack at explaining on the favorite characters page, why does the remove from favorites button work?
Is it from the use context?
Yeah, exactly. In the character card component, we use the outlet context. So wherever we render that character card, as long as it's getting rendered inside the outlet as a child, it can grab that context object and it has that functionality. Yeah, so now we have a favorite characters page that we can add characters to and from. What questions do folks have maybe around the implementation of this or around our use of the outlet and the outlet context? Especially as I know the outlet and outlet context was a sticking point yesterday. Will, was the favorite characters page ever added into the router? It was, we just did it way, way early on.
Sorry, my code got a bit messy there. But just so that everyone understands, we kind of cleaned it up a little bit. We made this function of add to favorites, checks the length of the current array of favorite characters to be less than 4. If it is less than 4, it's going to use the spread operator to grab all of the current values of favorite characters. So this is almost like destructuring, right? It's taking the original value of favorite characters and it's turning it into a list of separate individual entries. So now I have a list of objects and I'm essentially adding one more object into the end of that list. And then I'm doing this set favorites equals true, which is what renders my button or not. Down below, I have the same logic for removing a character. I'm essentially just filtering the current favorite characters array. The filter function returns an array as well. So I'm not setting the characters to the same value of the state as it was before. I'm setting it to the return value of the filter function. So I'm going through the filter function. I'm making sure that I'm grabbing all of the characters except for the one where my IDs match. And that's going to be returning it into my actual favorite characters array. And this will set it to false, allowing me to actually select a character over and over again. And then the part that's for each individual character, I want to make sure that I render this button correctly. So what I do is I filter through the favorite characters to check if it matches the ID. This is going to return an array of one entry if there is one that matches the ID that I'm currently on, or zero. So if it's zero, it's going to be false. So it's going to allow me to add. And if it's true, then it's going to allow me to remove. Crystal? You're muted in case you're speaking.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know my hand was raised.
Oh, okay.
Michael, you're asking about sort of like a logical flow explanation on how things are connected. Were you thinking like with how the pages and the routing works, or with outlet context? Is there a particular like area of focus?
Just a basic like the pages and just how everything's connected, because like some of the stuff's in the character card, some of it's over in the other portion, then we're utilizing different hooks just to kind of get an idea, because like after like 10-15 minutes of doing it, trying to recall everything and how it's all interconnected. Yeah, this is good too.
Yeah, let's draw it out. This is by far the best way to do that. That's a good call. This is definitely a good thing for us to do. So the NavBar always renders. And right below it, there's this outlet component. But React Router decides what, like, outlet itself doesn't render anything, but React Router sticks other components inside it as children and they get rendered. Right? And that's how each page in our routing gets rendered. And maybe what, like the all characters, a character, and favorites. I don't know if we need to do, we could do like home or about if you want, Francisco. I feel like those are the big boys though. So like our all characters page, right? Our favorites page. The a character page. And there's like the home page or the about page too, but those are a bit more straightforward, right? So each of those is a component and they're children because we put them in that children's array in our router. And our character card component, we import and render in a couple different places. Right? The same way you can import a function into multiple different places and use it, we do that with our character card component. And the app component has state favorite chars, and we'll see in a bit how we share that with outlet context.
Nope. Sorry about that. I'm trying to make this all fit nice and pretty so that we can take a look here.
Yeah, I have it on a big monitor, but it looks great.
Let me go ahead and move some things around. Okay, that should be clear enough, right? So we can all see this. We have our app, it's being rendered, and inside of our app, we have two actual components that are rendering. We have our nav and we have our outlet. Don't think of an outlet. I know it is a component, but I don't like to think about it that way. I like to think about it kind of like a bridge, right? The outlet does nothing but connect me to all of the children that I interpret in my router. So that's why over here, I have kind of like a closer look into the outlet, right? So here's my app children, and that's where my outlet actually connects me to. So my outlet connects me to my children, and it lets me know that I can apply characters, favorites, or a character. Now I have this favorite card or this favorite characters that I want to render, and I want it to be globally applicable to every single one of the pages or every single one of the children's of my app. So since I want it to be utilized in all of the children of my app, or at least be accessible in all of the children of my app, it has to live at the parent element, right? So I establish it within app.jsx. Now, in order to pass it down, all I need to do is tell my outlet context to take in my favorite character.
Yeah. And someone had a question about like, what if I wanted to share favorite characters with the NavBar? Well, we could just pass it down as a prop into the NavBar.
Yeah. So if I wanted to pass it down, I could do something like this. Whatever. It's kind of making it look a little dirty, but that's how I can pass it down to a component, which is my navbar. But if I'm passing it down to my outlet, it needs to get passed down as context, right? So now I have it available at my outlet, which tells all of the children in here that they can access this information. Not only can the children of app access this information, but the children of my app's children can also access that information. As long as they are being used within here, they can still access this context, all right? So now when I go to characters doesn't really get crazy because characters is just a simple API call, right? And it renders every single one. It renders multiple cards for multiple characters. Okay. And when I take a look at a character just makes a simple API call to grab some information here. And as well, it doesn't really get too crazy. It just grabs information, displays some character details, right? All of this is happening through API calls. I'm not actually writing or handwriting anything myself. Now, this favorite characters, that's where it comes in here. So this favorite characters we know is an array, and I know that I want it to be accessible in both characters and favorites. Well, in favorites here, it's actually pretty simple because all I need to do is map to it, right? Dot map. And I know that as long as I'm mapping, what I wanted to return is my card. Right, so that's all that's happening in favorites. I'm just mapping through the characters and iterating through the card. But now this card component is where all of the logic is actually happening. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this card component so I can take a look at it better. And, oh, let me bring it down here. And let me grab those favorite characters. And what's happening inside this card component is I'm not only asking it to render a card, I'm also asking it to conduct some logic. I'm asking it to, one, check if I'm grabbing this through use context. So I grab all of my favorite characters. And then what I do is I ask, hey, is this character on the card is in my favorite characters? Then button to add or button to remove should display. And then I'm also creating two functions. Add character or card character into favorite characters. Or remove character from favorite characters. And I apologize for my spelling. But that's all that's really happening here. If I'm looking at it in a simplified version, I'm creating a card that has a couple of functions that it's grabbing through context. The context is being passed, and the reason why card has access to these contexts is because the card is a child of one of the app children that belongs to the context. Does that help, Michael?
Yeah, that's actually really big. I can pick apart the stuff inside of each component, but to see how they interweave, it definitely just helps me visualize it a lot better seeing it like this.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Can you just export that image at some point? That's my
I
only
will.
question. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. Cool.
All right. Okay. What would be next then, Adam?
Yeah, I think we might need a short break because we've been at it straight for almost 2 hours. But we should probably double check, but I think this is all the functionality and it might make sense to do a little Cypress testing between now and the retro. What do you think, Francisco?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, we're a little jammed for time because it's 10:50. Um, we have a couple options. Should we take 10, reconvene, and then just go straight for 30 minutes right on into the retro? Or what are your thoughts, Francisco?
Let's just take 5 and then come back and so that we can do a little bit and we could give another 5-minute break right before retro.
That's a much better idea. I like it. Yeah, let's take 5, folks. We'll do a little Cypress testing, and then we'll take a bit of a break before retro.
No, I'm here in case anyone has any questions during the break. I think Adam's here as well.
I am, though I have to run to grab a glass of water in just a minute. Don't forget to hit the pause button, by the way.
Okay. I was gonna leave a recording, but very well.
Oh, no, that makes more sense. Yeah, we can just see what questions folks have.
Questions? No.
Yeah, what questions do people have? Prime, unfiltered, channel-free question asking time.
Okay, no one's asking questions. I'm gonna pause.
Yeah. Oh. All right, so we built Rick and Morty, which is awesome, and thanks to the feedback, I'm glad this has been a good review. We've got a bit of time where we can dig in and write some Cypress tests. So first off, we've got to install Cypress, which I think we can just do with an npm install Cypress. And just yeah. And once we've got Cypress installed, we're gonna have to create that config file for it. And I believe the name was cypress.config.js. And there's a couple things we have to do inside there once we make it. And like Francisco's doing, we're going to need a directory that we're just going to name Cypress to put our tests in. And inside that, E2E, because we're going to write end-to-end tests. And just create a test file just so it exists. And the test has to have .cy in the name. And we can add .spec too if we want, it won't hurt, but .cy and then .j. Do we want the JSX at the end? We might want that to be just plain JS. I'm not 100%, but
I think once the rollup is done, everything is interpreted as plain JS.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I think, you might be right. I think the important thing is we do need the .cy.
Yeah.
And so now we've got an empty test in there. And what do you think? Should we make the Cypress config now?
Let's do it.
All right. And this gets created in the root directory of our project. Cypress.config.js.
I don't know the syntax off the top of my head. You're gonna have to walk me through this one, Adam.
Yeah, no worries. We're gonna want to import function define config from Cypress, and it's a named import, so we need to do it inside the curly brackets. Yeah, and the VS autocomplete will get a little screwy here, so make sure to import from Cypress, folks. And now we want to do export defaults define config. We're going to call this function, and it's going to return some configuration object that Cypress will use. And we need to pass an object as our argument into this define config function. And we're going to add a whole bunch of properties to this object. The first property is named E2E for end-to-end. And this is also going to be an object. And we need to tell Cypress the URL to go to run all these tests. Because remember, Cypress runs the browser. So we need to set the property base URL to HTTP localhost port 5173. And we can stick a slash on the end there just to be safe. Yes, sir. That looks great. And we want to add below that support file false, because we're not using any support files with our Cypress config. And that, I think, has the E2E configuration set. And now below E2E, we need another attribute named viewport width. And we can just set it to the size of 1024 pixels. And below that, viewport height, which we can set to 768 pixels. And these are, and you don't need the PX at the end. My apologies. It just wants the number. Yep, and just there's an extra colon on line 8. Yes, sir. And then 768. And when Cypress opens the browser window to run the tests, this is the size of the viewport. And right below that, we just need to put video false so that Cypress does not try to record a video, which we don't need, and I think would take a really long time. And I think then that is our complete Cypress config object. You folks really shouldn't be changing or modifying that. And now we can start writing some Cypress tests. And so the describe function, the first argument is a description. The second argument is an arrow function. And then we use it, and each it statement is each individual test and assertion. And again, we write our description, and now in the arrow function, we'll put the actual stuff that we want it to do. And if give me actually just one moment to get to where I need to be. So, oh yeah, no, you've already got there. So site.visit takes us to the homepage, and we want to check that it exists, so we can use sci.get. And this is like the Cypress object that has everything. And let's look for an ID. And so we need the hashtag symbol and then home-page. And we can look in our code to see where this is. But so like open up a double quote block and then hashtag home-page. Or we can do the H1. Oh yeah, no, you're right, man. I apologize. I got myself confused. I was thinking about the homepage.
I think that's right, right?
Yeah, we might want that. Yeah, we can move it somewhere later, but this is a good example of checking that the homepage exists. We might as well check that the navbar exists as well. And because we know the navbar will always be there. So we can do the same thing where we could do sci.get and we could search for the nav element and .should and then exist. And so the homepage test, we might move somewhere else, but we know for every page, for all of our pages, there's always a navbar. So this one should be true. And now we've got like a Cypress Hello World test that we can go ahead and run. And just like Francisco did, we need the dev server running. And we also want to go ahead and create some scripts to help us write our Cypress code.
Oh, I can't remember the command off the top of my head. Could you help me out here, please, Adam?
Yes, sir. And I apologize because I need to pull up my reference code. Here we go. So we're going to make two scripts, run. It's npx cypress run. And then -- spec if we want to have it so we pass in a specific file. And our other script will be sci:\open, and that is just Cypress open.
Just like that?
So the run script is for using on if we just want to run our tests in the command line. Sci:\open, if we run it, will open up the full Cyrus GUI and we can see that in action. And I wonder if you need sudo when you run it.
Looks like I do.
Yeah, this is the thing with the weirdness of sudo and node and npm. It's like once you start, you always have to use it. So on a Mac, we use Chrome. For Windows and WSL people, you'll want to and have to select Electron. Electron works on a Mac as well. And here we can see our tests. We can see our tests running. There was a good question if we need spec in the file name, and it turns out we don't. It's actually the .cy that Cypress needs in the file name. And you were totally right, Francisco. It doesn't care if it's .js or JSX at the end. And it looks like we've got an assertion error. Is the home page an H2?
Oh, I think it is actually. Let me go ahead and close all this stuff down. It is.
And so the Cypress GUI auto updates, so we don't have to restart it all the time. And now we can see both our tests are passing. And if we take a look at the browser, we can click on each test and see what Cypress does for each step. And should we maybe show how to dig into the NavBar a bit in some tests so we can show selectors for classes and maybe looking at the contents of our NavBar brand?
Yeah, definitely. Let's make a test for that. Um,
And if you want, we could test like the nav links into the same file, or we could do it in a different one. I think that'd be good too, because we dig into selectors and then we can see some clicking around in Cypress and stuff as well. So let's make a test to test that the brand is correct and that it says Rick and Morty. That our brand should be Rick and Morty. And we always want to start with side.visit to our homepage. So just to slash. I think that's a good starting point for every test because it makes it easy to do. Yeah, I know we don't get good VS completion with the Cypress. It's a pain. And then let's check that the nav exists, just like we did in our other test. Let's just do side.get.nav should exist. And let's do a side.get. But here let's do some selectors. So let's do nav angle bracket div angle bracket A. Yes, sir. And so this is telling Cypress to do some CSS selection to find the nav element and go inside it and find the first div. And then inside of that to find the first A link. And if we go and look at our, you can kind of see how this is laid out. And we should totally double check that this is correct. And we could grab, so we could do a couple things here. We could test that the class is correct. Yeah, I like that. We can just use the ID to go right to the NavBar brand. And we can do should, and then it's have.text. Yes, sir. And then whatever text that it should have. Right. So for the dot should, the first argument is a special Cypress command as a string, and the second is the one that we care about. Let's see how we do here. All right, so we visit the page. Cypress confirms the nav exists. We get the brand by ID. and we check that it contains the text Rick and Morty.
Something that I want to make very clear in this, and I'm sure that it was nailed on before, but notice that in our code, if we take a look at our NavBar, this is not an anchor tag. This is actually a link tag. And everything else that we have here are link tags. But link is only something that we reference to as a class that we're importing from React Router DOM. But when the browser interprets that code and renders HTML, it is still being rendered as an anchor tag, even though we are utilizing a link tag. Please make sure that you have that clear, because we know that the difference between an anchor tag and a link tag is an anchor tag will cause a refresh, while a link tag will not. It will just redirect you. That's important to understand for the assessment.
And actually, this is maybe a good point to see if folks have any questions, and then we can add one or two more Cypress tests where we click around. All right. Francisco, what do you think about, let's add a test that we can click on the navbar link to go to the all characters page.
All right.
Yeah, I think it works fine as a inside here, just say able to contains link to all characters page and if you want, we could test. Yeah, and links are functional. Yeah, so you might be right. Maybe we want to make this a describe block and we can put two its inside it.
We have, one that will check each individual link and then the other one that's functional. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't have strong feelings either way.
I'm just trying to save time. I apologize.
No, I think you're right. Let's do it. Yeah, let's test that the link exists for the all characters page. So we're gonna want to do yeah, so we're gonna have to grab those hrefs. So first we just want to do a side.visit to make sure we're there. And then, like you were pointing out, Francisco, we can see that like there's a bunch of links that all have the class navlink. So if we do side.get.nav-link, that gets us an array of all of those href tags that have the navlink. And if we want to get the first one, we can do .eq, and we can give the index of the one that we want. So EQ0 as I think it's parentheses, gives us the very first link, and we can do a .should and contain text. And our first link is characters. I think it might need to be contain.text, but I'm not certain. Oh, have.text works just fine. My apologies. And characters. And we can add another .should on here to check the link itself.
Say again.
And we can do a .should have.attr attribute. And pass another argument href as a string And then finally, the last argument, which is what the href should be, which is /characters and then another slash at the end. And fingers crossed we got this test right, and this should confirm that we have that link on the page. And let's see what we got wrong here. So that looks like an easy fix. I apologize. I was looking at some guide code and we had it named different. And now, if that link works, these tests should pass. All right. And do you want to just maybe code up like a navigation to the characters page in that test as well? Nice. And if we want to, what we can do, we can see now that we navigate, and in fact, we can look at the location in the URL bar and do a should. And we can see like each step that Cypress does here. Nice. And I think, what do you think? Should we kind of demo checking the URL in the path? And then that's probably our stopping point.
I think we can. I think that's gonna be our stopping point. Let's do that one.
I think you can just do, well, it depends how you want to do it. We could do side dot location. And we actually have to call this function. So we, with no arguments, and then we add a dot should. And this one's a little different. We have to pass in an arrow function. And it's going to take location as an argument. And then we're going to throw an assertion that says expect location dot path name to equal, and I believe it's all characters. So this checks the actual URL in the URL bar, and that's why I believe why we have to use the arrow function. And note that within this test, Cypress has already clicked and navigated to the characters page. And so then once that navigation is done on line 15, and we're checking that we are where we think we should be. Yeah, let's see how we do. Oh, it should be, my apologies, 2 dot equal. Yeah. Every test library loves it. That looks right. And we may see one thing pop up. Maybe I got it wrong and we do need to have the click because it looks like we're looking at undefined.
This path name is coming back as undefined. Is there a different syntax?
Oh, man. Yeah, all lowercase. My apologies. Let's try that. Good catch. So
Oh, I think I,
yes, this one, I was gonna point that out in a sec. When we're passing the path, we don't need to pass the full URL. We just need to pass off of that base URL. So we don't need to add localhost port 5173.
there you go.
And now we've navigated to the all characters page. We've tested that the URL is what we expect it should be. And we've got just 3 minutes before the retro. So this is probably a good time to break so we all can stand up for a minute. And then we can kick it off proper with about 10 minutes to fill out the doc and dive into our retro for the week. Francisco, thank you so much again, man, for helping with the review. This has been awesome, and I hope this has been useful to folks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate your patience.